Hi everyone, Tu Lee here, one half of the China EVs and More duo. Lei and I are always thinking about different ways to bring you, our audience, relevant and compelling content about the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors, especially now that several companies that we've tracked over the last 50 plus episodes have become global phenomenon. China EVs and More Max is where we bring you special content in the form of conversations we have with special guests from those sectors. In this episode, we talked to Dr. Stephan Wöllenstein, CEO of Volkswagen Group China. Having just unveiled the much anticipated ID Buzz, and with the Trinity representing its next generation of EVs on the horizon, Europe's largest automaker is in the midst of a massive transformation from a traditional legacy automaker to a software-driven e-mobility provider. It's also facing strong headwinds in arguably its most important and largest market, in the world's for that matter, China. Volkswagen Group was one of the pioneering automakers in China's early days with iconic nameplates like the Santana and the Jetta. But now, it's not only playing catch-up in the new energy vehicle game, it's also having to navigate the ongoing chip supply shortage and sporadic outbreaks of COVID-19 cases here in China, which significantly impacted its market performance here. With group-wide sales down 14% to 3.3 million units in 2021, it prompted Dr. Wöllenstein to describe 2021 as one of the most challenging years in the history of the company here.
This is your co-host Lei Xing. 2021 was certainly a tough year for Volkswagen Group China. The core Volkswagen brand took most of the brunt as its MQB-based models were overproportionately affected by the chip shortage. And it also had to confront a new reality. Homegrown Chinese brands that used to be the ones chasing from behind have now either caught up or even surpassed it in many aspects of the competition, especially in the NEV game. Foreign automakers like Volkswagen, though still ahead as a whole in terms of market share, are needing to adapt like never before. So I asked Dr. Wöllenstein about his own observations of how the Chinese brands are winning so far in the NEV game, what Volkswagen is doing to address competition and step up its own NEV game, including working with interesting local Chinese startups, and how the industry has changed over his tenure in China, spanning over a dozen years, that will come to an end in August when Volkswagen brand CEO Ralph Brandstetter succeeds him. I've spoken to Dr. Wöllenstein in person on numerous occasions, on and off the record, since 2017, well before he was appointed to the Group China CEO position. And he's always been frank, patient, and open. It was no different this time. Here's my conversation with Dr. Wöllenstein. Thank you very much for your time. So I guess, you had a tough year. And in the middle of the year, I wrote an article about, what went on with the ID series, that it was kind of a crossing the river by feeling the stones, sort of. Where do you feel you are? Do you think you've felt enough stones that you're actually on a good trajectory, or are there still some issues?
There are still some issues, frankly, because as I also stated earlier, we started effectively selling ID cars, as you probably have recognized, end of March last year. So it was not even a full year. But let's say we started end of March when more or less simultaneously both ID4 models from FAW Volkswagen and SAIC Volkswagen became available for purchase and delivery to customers. So of course, with let's say a traditional automaker as us getting into a market which is clearly yet very much dominated by startup companies who have only an NEV profile. Of course, it needed us some time in order to get us also known as being a competent NEV player in this field. But more or less on month basis, we were able to double the sales. Fortunate enough, we had been in, even it was a bumpy ride, I have to say, but over the last 3 to 4 years, we were also sitting together with our Chinese partners, and we're also discussing some fundamental changes on the sales model for the ID car. So as you probably know, the ID cars are, unlike our ICE ones, are sold via the agency model, which was not an overnight decision, which was prepared for many years, I have to say. Talking to the Chinese colleagues, convincing about the benefits of going into the agency model for this new generation, this completely different kind of cars, which was good. We also early enough decided that we probably do need also to enhance a bit our retail presence. We had always in mind to have kind of ID exclusive flagship stores. Probably in the beginning, just to unveil, we had in mind maybe a number of 40 or 50. But what we figured out, probably even the time when you are already, let's say, stuck in the US, that in China it's rapidly changing also the consumer behavior, in particular on NEV customers. You know that Xiaopeng and NIO, in particular, those players, they went as they have no network at all, they went in particular into a different retail mode where they went into high frequent shopping malls to offer their car and to display it for their customers. So our kind of flagship concept was reflecting this already at an early stage, but we figured out that customers like this sales mode in particular. So together with our 2 joint ventures, we have massively, let's say, increased the ramp-up speed. And now we talk about 120, roughly, locations that are in the major NEV cities in China, already in high-frequent downtown areas. And we probably by the middle of the year will have about 200. So it's similar of the network that Tesla has across the country. So we have accelerated something that we had always in mind, but we were observing that this is becoming a new trend. It probably needs to be further accelerated and cannot be kept only on a small flagship store side. So I would say structurally we had prepared a lot. We were very flexible in terms of also adjusting our strategy, hence more or less on a month-to-month basis, we were doubling our sales, with numbers peaking up in September to 14,000 units. Very well on the way to really go for the hot Q4, as you know, when people fear that subsidies are running out and you should better buy your car now. So we were preparing really for monthly rates of 18, 19, 20,000 units. And then unfortunately, the global semiconductor problem also hit ID sales. It was mainly 5 electronic parts, which made us, which made it impossible for us to really build complete cars. Stocks were anyway very slim, so we could not even breathe out of stock from the IDs. So if you really look on our Q4 sales, we were kind of stagnating because we were simply not able to build cars. On top of it, we saw something that is in the West probably not that much recognized, that also because of the very strict COVID measures of Chinese government, we saw some regional lockdowns. Tianjin faced a lockdown. Ningbo was a particular topic in December, when you probably have also noticed that Ningbo was kind of, let's say, lockdown, including a number of substantial suppliers for Volkswagen, as they have a production base in Ningbo. And of course, typically their supplier base is very much in the Yangtze River Delta, including Ningbo. So we lost several thousand units of production, ICE and ID, unfortunately. So therefore, also in December, we were double hit. Global semiconductor shortage, also affecting IDs, plus some local effects like Ningbo and later Tianjin. So also January, if you really look on our ID sales numbers, I'm not happy at all because we were far below the 10,000 numbers simply because we have no cars. So we hopefully now production is kicking back in. We are able now to build up what we have nicely established until September to come back to a sales rhythm that allows us to go for numbers like 13, 14, 15,000 units. And probably when the market is getting stronger, typically in the NAV part, as you know, towards the second half of the year, that we also come back to the sales rhythm that we initially more or less have already established last year with sales rates of 15 to 20,000 units per year. So overall, hopefully this will lead to a situation that we will massively increase our ID sales. Last year it was in total with this 9 months about 70,000 units. Doesn't make sense to tell you our sales plan because it's really all depends on the supplies, which are still a bit, let's say, vague. But let's say my sincere hope is that we will certainly be able to double the sales on ID models come this year, maybe even more. As we are really clear, staying clear on focus, we will also show in Beijing kind of an outlook how we will further expand our pure battery electric vehicle portfolio based on the MEB platform. This year we will not introduce another car. We have already 5 on sale. Next year, from next year onwards, we will bring more or less every year at least one additional new model on the MEB base, including certainly from end of 24 onwards or end of 23 onwards in terms of production, and then on sale in 2024, the models coming out of Volkswagen Anhui. So therefore, let's say we are playing hard on our NEV ramp up and hoping that the semiconductors will not affect us that massive as in 2021. We will certainly see a 3-digit increase on ID sales also this year.
Okay, here's my question on, we talked about production, we talked about channels, but I think the gist of the matter is the products themselves.
Yes.
Okay, so you've done, 70,000 units, but there's still a bit of, 5 ID series models. And if you probably don't like this comparison, let's say a Li Auto 1 selling with one model. I mean, it's not a fair comparison, but my question is, after 70,000 units, what kind of feedback have you been getting from the customers? Where do you need to improve on the product side? Because I think you still face a bit of an issue on the products themselves. Don't you agree?
Yeah, yes and no. I would say if you really look at the NEV market 2021 and certainly also to an extent also this year and the coming years, the NEV market is still a bit of a strange animal. I mean, if you look at the structure, of the market, and I have a slide in front, which unfortunately I cannot share, but let's say the price volume distribution of the NEV market is completely different than from what we know from the ICE market, which is still the dominant force in China, and it reflects more or less buying power and buying habits of Chinese consumers. And if you look into this market, you see, let's say, the NEV market peaking at 2 extremes, where the normal market is relatively falling down. One is the entry area, which is counting for almost 40% of all NEVs that you find in the statistics, which is effectively all BEVs, which are the famous mini BEVs from our friends from SAIC with their Wuling brand. So cars that are, let's say, sold under 60,000 RMB. So it's more or less the evolutionary step from an electric two-wheeler into an electric four-wheeler, which is making about 40% of the market. And then the models that you're referring to are the other peak, the other end of the market. We see an artificial high of about almost 20% of all NEVs sold beyond 250,000 RMB. So this is, as you know, it's already premium market territory from a price point. So normally Chinese customers at 250,000 RMB and above are buying Mercedes, BMW, Audis, Cadillacs, Volvos, you name it. So we see a habit, and the cars that you're mentioning are really people who have the buying power and the buying willingness to trade at premium market prices. And certainly their level of expectation, why to buy an electric car and not why to buy a 3 Series BMW, an Audi A4 or Audi A6, is certainly that they want to make a statement. And we did a lot of in-depth interviews with people who considered our cars but finally rejected. Also talked to people that bought Teslas, Chaupins, BYDs, whatsoever. And clearly the expectation of this very affluent customers is different than the mainstream Chinese. Because of deciding with this buying power to go for a non-traditional brand in an NEV mode, they want to make a statement of having something radically different and advanced compared to, let's say, the mainstream brands and mainstream, let's say, cars on offer. Therefore, they pay very high interest in futuristic design, as they call it. And of course, they are into the latest gadgets in terms of perceived innovation. And this has also rapidly changed over the last 3 to 4 years. So where it was about 3 years ago, it was all about kind of what we call connectivity. So the car is permanently connected to the internet. You have some services. You can operate apps out of the car. It is now turning in the last 18 months, I would say, massively also into features like automated driving. So typically level 2+ ones with all the downsides, the cases that Tesla and NIO had in this respect. But a lot of brands are experimenting and offering hardware side, at least level 3 capabilities, even if they are limited in terms of use. But it is a kind of a brand proposition that is very much circling around futuristic design and extreme innovation, which is understandable because it needs to be justified why they are trading at such high price points. Volkswagen, whatsoever, we are in a positive trap, so to say, because Volkswagen always is about, let's say, a very well-balanced package. So for us, it's also about safety and quality. For us, it's about daily usability. And if you really talk to customers, they acknowledge, even if they buy, for instance, a Chaupin P7, they say your seats are definitely better. Your driving ability is certainly better. Your range nomination is more accurate than I find it on the Chinese. I see all the traditional values from Volkswagen and I say they are definitely better than on my startup car, but I wanted to have a car that is looking much more progressive and which is offering, let's say, the latest technical gadgets. And this is not what is available with Volkswagen. Yeah, because on Volkswagen, we are like on a Tiguan, Passat, Magotan, Sagita, we go for the very well-balanced package. And certainly we have all these features in a different form also in our cars. You know, if you look on the design on the ID cars, external, internal, they look much different than a combustion engine. We have also level 2 driving functions in the car. Our travel assist, if I drive it in the evening here on 3rd and 4th Ring Road in Beijing, it can drive almost autonomously. The only point is because of legal obligation, every 10 seconds, the car is alarming me that I please take over the steering wheel. Otherwise, I could be driven from office to home on the ring roads by the car itself. So we have a lot of features in, but not to the extreme as our Chinese customers that are currently buying in these price ranges are requesting. What we see, however, that, of course, as the market is now growing, there will be a clear trend that, of course, the price-volume distribution in the NEV market will, of course, narrow to the one that we know in the, call it, traditional remaining rest of the market, which means that people are also going to buy somewhere between price points 100 to 250,000 RMB, which is normally the home territory of the Volkswagen brand. And people going into this often are also, let's say, families. They, of course, regard higher daily usability. Safety is in particular a hot topic. And you know that the ID cars have really performed extremely well on safety-related features. We had been the best ever tested car in CERSI. There was, let's say, from an institute, a direct car-to-car crash with a Tesla, where the ID.6 was also showing extremely strong performance. So all these traditional, so to say, values that come into play when you go into this price territories, we see that more and more customers are also attracted then by the Volkswagen proposition, as they are also in the typical ICE world. And on some cars like ID3, we see, for instance, that young females over proportionally go into this car because for them it seems to be a fancy, attractive alternative also to be driven in an electric manner in a pretty compact, hence a very sophisticated car. So I would say future is working for us. In the current world, for the reasons that I tried to explain, yes, it's probably not the rapid start into number one position, but let's say as the market is going massively into a direction that NEV becomes a second new normal in China, we will also see much more normal pattern and much more a distribution of consumer groups looking for cars that is similar what we know from our ICE cars.
Yeah, I certainly hope Volkswagen finds kind of its mojo back.
And we are innovating, Ching. Don't forget, we have our innovation roadmap, and for both ICEs and NEVs, which will also be the key focus of our activities. And where from, let's say, next year on, you will also see very nice features kicking in. And also this year, we will be, as we stated, in Europe, also in China, we will be able to do over-the-air updates. I mean, in terms not only bug fixing, but upgrades and updates of our software. We have currently the latest software version in internal testing and are prepared to release it pretty soon on the newly produced cars. And then, of course, we will invite our customers with existing IDs during the course of the first half of this year to really come and to get the latest software update. And from there on, we will be able, like other brands, we'll be able to update also our cars. So there's also a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, which will further improve also the technology aspect of our car. But I would say Volkswagen will never, because it doesn't fit to our overall brand proposition, we will never go to this, let's say, extreme in terms of bringing the latest possible innovations into our car, sometimes only semi-proven at the edge of what is legally possible. Not meaning, of course, that we will not also go heavy into the direction of automated driving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say patience is the virtue, right? So let's switch gears a little bit. And we talk about, I describe it as a dumbbell effect, right? The Wuling on one hand, and then the premium on the other hand, and then the handle part is where Volkswagen is at, right? And then your other two brands, which is having very interesting market performance, Skoda and Jetta, are going completely different directions. Can you explain what's going on? Why is Skoda? I mean, it's not right. It did 300,000 units just 5-6 years ago. Now it's doing much less than Jetta. Do you think there's some issue here that you're confronting, positioning wise? What can you say?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting observation. First of all, let's start with the positive side. I mean, we are very pleased that Jetta really creates now momentum. We have also seen in January probably one of the highest ever monthly sales numbers with more than 20,000 units being sold also for Jetta.
Oh, that's good.
In January. So it was always meant to be a kind of not a cheap brand, but a kind of an entry brand, bringing a lot of the benefits that people know from the Volkswagen brand at a more affordable price point. Of course, not with the latest level of technology and not the latest level of refinement, what we were able to and willing to offer on a Volkswagen. And we were always aiming to have this car serving for entry customers or first-time buyers in China in probably less developed areas. You know that we typically have this differentiation between tier 1 to tier 5 cities, and it was always meant that Jetta is particular focusing on tier 3 to tier 5 areas, which they are doing. So their market share, even in tier 4, tier 5 cities, is double as high as it is on the national average. So seeing it really resonates very well with people in the less affluent areas of China, which are looking into a competent, well-equipped but reasonably priced car with a lot of the benefits that they know traditionally also from the Volkswagen brand. So Jetta works pretty well. And we are currently also, let's say, on the way to bring the next generation of cars for Jetta in order to continue this momentum. Skoda, however, if you recall the beginning, I mean, I was in China when Skoda was launched, which was my SVW times back in 2005-6, when Skoda was really brought into the Chinese market. At that time, honestly speaking, you could sell anything to Chinese customers that has an international connotation. And therefore, Skoda was also very well perceived because, like in Europe, it's a very good package between product quality and price points. So Skoda really developed very nicely alongside many other international brands. What we observe, however, in the last, I would say, 3-4 years is what is kind of natural, a massive shakeout in terms and a massive consolidation on branding in China. And we see it if I look for a second and we leave the NEV market for a second aside. What we observe in the traditional ICE market is very much a consolidation on brands. There are a few Chinese brands who seem to establish themselves, also able to perform up to top 10 position in the Chinese market. And we see a bunch of international brands. It's mainly, if we are honest, it's us and some Japanese brands who are really, let's say, playing within the top 5 of the Chinese market. And we saw at the other side also a kind of a, let's say, a rapid reduction on other very well-known international brands. Without naming them specifically, I guess as a close observer of the industry, you know whom I'm talking about.
Yeah, we know who they are.
Yeah, and Skoda seems to be a bit of a kind of a similar victim. So we are, of course, looking very closely how we can get a sharper image for Skoda Plus, which is probably a magic question that we are currently considering. How shall we deal with Skoda when it comes to electrification? I mean, today you see a lot of brands who try, like us, Volkswagen, for instance, or Audi, to really play in a competent manner in both fields, the NEV market as well as in the ICE market. Also now Toyota, after for a long time, let's say, sticking to hybridization only, is now on the way to go into electrification as well. So, I mean, all relevant players, including the Chinese, are trying to really walk on two legs, so to say. So the question is really on a brand like Skoda, shall we do the same? You know, that Skoda has very attractive models in the NEV field on sale in Europe, which are very well accepted.
Sure.
On the other hand, given the relatively smaller volume base for Skoda in China, the question is it justified from this perspective to electrify Skoda? So there are a number of questions that we are currently discussing internally to see really how a breakthrough strategy for Skoda look like, knowing, however, that Skoda is working against a general market trend that we see a substantial consolidation of brands.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Would it be fair to say that for the foreseeable future that your NEV strategy will focus primarily on the VW brand, Audi, Porsche, and not so much on the Jetta and Skoda? Would it be fair to say that?
Yeah, I guess for the time being, it is simply a rationale. And let's say the three brands that you have mentioning, I guess, have in their respective sector a substantial position already in the ICE market, which also commercially justifies the investment into the NEV. And you know that it makes no sense, in particular for a volume brand such as Skoda, to consider electrification with import cars. I mean, our Porsche does, because they are a pure import brand yet. And whereas Audi and Volkswagen are very much on localization. Therefore, also electrification is based on local production. So if we would do something like this for Škoda, it needs to be on a local basis. And the question is really, and we are not able at reasonable price points to offer any electric Škoda on an import basis. And this, of course, means that we have to carefully judge between the needed investment on one side compared to the expected volume we can foresee for Škoda BEV car in China. So you are probably right that, let's say, short term at least, we will concentrate our electrification efforts in particular when we talk about locally produced cars in the set of Volkswagen and Audi. Audi is going to also offer two pure electric vehicles, so BEVs this year. One from FAW Volkswagen, one from SAIC Audi. And so it will be also interesting to see how Audi is going on with their electrification strategy in China. So it is for good reasons currently the focus on what we are doing on BEVs.
Okay, 2 quick questions, yes or no answers. The goal to sell 1.5 million NEVs in China in 2025, that's still in place?
Yes, otherwise we would have made wrong decisions on the production capacity.
Okay. And the other question is, has Volkswagen ever considered investing into a Chinese EV company?
No, not really. We are investing currently so much in Chinese companies, Goshen, for instance, and also with JAC, with our JAC Volkswagen. I guess we have already the precondition, but even if it is not a yes or no, we have also now extended our partnership scope with other Chinese companies, which is not necessarily always an OEM.
Yeah. So going upstream to the batteries and the autonomous driving, I think you shared in the group media interview that you're working with 3 batteries relationships, CATL, Goshen, and A123, and as well as the DJI partnership. Why these 2 companies, A123 and DJI?
Let's say A123 is pretty simple. I mean, we are currently basing all our MEB cars on CATL, which is probably by far the biggest player in the Chinese market. But it was clear that we can and shall not base all our electrification on one battery supplier alone. So therefore, we did the strategic investment into Goshen. And it was always clear that we do like we do on key components anyway, that we are looking for a second supplier. So we really requested almost everybody in the Chinese battery market to offer. And in the end, it was also about technical qualification and pricing. And in the end, A123 was selected as a very competent player. Coming now into play into our small battery cell producer portfolio. So as you rightfully say, it is then consisting of 3 suppliers where we can balance a bit our huge demand. Because demand, as you probably know, it's about 150 gigawatt hours battery cell capacity that we need by the middle of the decade. And this to source simply with only one supplier, it's a bit risky. And it's also stretching them a bit too much. So this is simply a balance and a risk reduction scenario. And then DJI.
Okay, and
DJI is a funny story. I personally came across with DJI in 2016 on a marketing corporation for a Goten launch. And I was sitting together with Frank and its management team on DJI at a dinner in Shenzhen. And then we were talking about also future plans of DJI. And they were telling me that they were considering to expand their scope into automotive. And so we got into talks, and we paid them a visit in Shenzhen at a very early stage when they showed us about their, let's say, their willingness to go into kind of autonomous driving functions. They're excellent, as you know, in terms of sensor integration and on software development, also for sensors based on camera systems in particular. And so we really formed a project together, and we are about to bring probably come next year. A function also going into our combustion engine vehicles. That is a kind of a level 2 plus driving function, very nice, which we are developing together with DJI. So we are taking their competence, they are taking us as a big lever into the automotive market in order to really form a typical win-win cooperation. Which allows us to have a pretty attractive package at a reasonable price to offer kind of reasonable autonomous driving to our customers very soon.
Okay, and you know that they're also doing LiDARs, right?
Yes.
There's this spin-off. So one extra question, do you consider putting on LiDARs? Because a lot of Chinese EV companies, they're doing that. Do you have that plan?
Yeah, definitely. We have to put LiDARs on when we really go into level 3, level 4 driving. But I mean, this is a bit coming back to my proposition on the NEV market. I mean, currently we see that a lot of brands are putting the latest possible technology into the car, including LiDARs, which are currently, given the regulation we see, are not really usable because you're not really allowed to drive autonomous. When we go into level 3, level 4 autonomous driving, you need LiDARs, you need radar sensors, you need camera systems, you need almost everything. And in order to integrate all the signals, you need, of course, high computing power. This is where also a lot of companies are currently working on to get the necessary chipsets in place in order to have the computing power in the car at reasonable energy consumption rates, which is another topic to really integrate. For us, we try to really, let's say, have a purpose, a suitable approach. So if you want to do level 2 plus driving functions, it is, of course, the cheapest possible way to do it with camera and radar-based systems and not to use LiDARs. They are not absolutely necessary to do a level 2 plus function. And then you are able to do this in a let's say, a more attractive price proposition to the customers. When you later go into level 3 and level 4, you certainly need LiDARs. Volkswagen will also use them. But of course, then the willingness to pay from a customer has to be a different one, or we would have probably to go into a subscription model that only when autonomous driving in up to this level is being used, customers pay for it. But as soon as you go into LiDAR technology, you get damned expensive.
Yeah, I think in fact that's what the Chinese smart EV startups are doing. They have the hardware ready, but you actually have to pay and subscribe to get that function. I think that's what they're doing right now. Okay, so I think we've gotten all the tough questions out. The next one is the crystal ball questions. So some predictions of the market scale this year. So last year was CAAM numbers with 3.5 million.
Yeah.
And this year, the lowest predictions are 5 million, the highest is 6 million. What is your crystal ball say? And what is Volkswagen Group's target in terms of how much share you want to take up this year? Because I know you said the ID is doubling the ID sales, but there's other NEVs, right?
Yeah, I would say this year it's very much, let's say, a production limitation year. We have to confess we will most likely not be able to sell all cars that we would be able to sell. If I see how supplies are currently kicking in, we probably cannot be really market or demand orientated in our supplies. Nevertheless, we will be able to substantially grow. As far as the total market is concerned, I also believe that this year we will see maybe in the order of 4 million plus NEVs, but still with a substantial high share of the mini BEVs, where we never wanted to be in. So if you cut at least a third of this market out, then you probably talk about a battery electric vehicle car market, which is considered for us as a kind of a relevant one in the order of maybe 2.7 to 3 million units, where we then with the Audi offers and the Volkswagen offers come into play. Midterm, we believe that the market will develop better than the government originally predicted. You know that the original government prediction was about 20%. We probably can see that the market mid of the decade 25, 26 is probably in the order of 25 to 30% already to grow further. But magic question is...
I think you're very conservative.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We have a number of, let's say, we ask a number of institutes, and the variety of predictions, I have it in front of me. The most optimistic ones are going for 33% share in 25, and the government target was 20% in the beginning. And even the optimistic ones, the long-term end of the decade 2030, see about 60% of the market NAV. The conservative one is again, let's say, government-related authorities with something like 40%. So you can imagine that maybe the truth will be somewhere in the middle. And something that needs to be, let's say, considered is Chinese customers are still very sensitive on money. And this also explains where always Q4 is a massive effect when the subsidy is going to go to the next lower level. And from next year onwards, there is no longer any subsidy. And you see already that Chinese brands are starting to increase prices because they are not able to absorb any longer the subsidy shortfall because of their cost position.
Yeah, I personally think that the tipping point has gone past us, whereas even without subsidies starting next year, I don't think this will change the consumer behavior of switching to EVs, because it's in a lot of the segments, EVs are on a price parity with ICEs. So that's my personal opinion. So I think this year will be very close to 20% already, if not over.
Could be 20%. I would not deny.
Right. Some lighter question. What is your advice? I mean, I know you still have 6 months left, but what is your advice for Ralph when he comes over in the summer? Because he doesn't have your experience of being in China for such a long time, but he's tasked with this important position. What are your advice?
I give him advice more or less on a weekly basis. We are having phone calls and Skype meetings at least once a week. Last call was on Sunday, even the second last week that we talked about an hour. So we are, let's say, this will probably be the smoothest handover that we have seen in the group for a long, long time, as we are really walking in parallel, as he tries to get into the job as much as possible already from beginning of this year onwards. I guess in the end, it's also what is true for the vast majority of other board members, and as well as for people like you. I mean, behind the invisible curtain of COVID-19, China has massively changed in the last 2 to 3 years. And the last time that any board member was able to come to China with reasonable effort was summer 2019. And since summer 2019, right, China has dramatically changed in many ways, and you need to be here on China soil in order to figure out. We are sending them pictures, videos, reports, whatsoever. But as you know, there is a difference of having a day-by-day lively experience or reading some reports. And in the end, that's what's needed also in the end, beside all briefings and discussions we are doing beforehand, for Ralph to be really here with his family and start to live in China.
Yeah, I mean, even the 2 years I've been outside of China, I've been gone. I feel like if I were to go back, I don't know whether I'll be used to it. You see what I'm saying? Because you need to be there to experience the fast pace of changes. Otherwise, you fall behind. And that's what I'm feeling right now. Maybe, I don't know, you can reflect on a bit on maybe when you're way back when you're at SAIC Volkswagen and then FAW Volkswagen and the Volkswagen brand CEO and then the group China CEO. What are your, how do you summarize this time?
Yeah, what is my summary? I would say in the end, China finally made it. I mean, what we are currently seeing is that China gets into I would say, a normal pattern of who is relevant in this market, and let's say what position also the Chinese market has on a global scale. I mean, China is already today by far the largest automotive market. But it was in the past years still characterized by two strange patterns. It's the only big producing country in the world where national players play a kind of a minor role. Mm-hmm. You know that traditionally Chinese brands are only counting, depending on, let's say, the up and down swings, somewhere between 30 to 40% of the total market, whereas in all other key markets, Germany, France, the US, whatsoever, it's mainly the national players who are kind of dominating meaning at least doing 50, 60% of the market. This is now also about to change for China. We see it in the NEV market, and it certainly over the years to come, it will also find its way into the overall market. That probably not all of the Chinese brands that we see today, but let's say a selection of them will also be permanently in the top 10, maybe even in top 5 positions in the Chinese market. And the share of indigenous brands and indigenous OEMs on the Chinese total market will be probably in the order of around 50%, which is then a kind of a normality that we observe in the rest of the world. The second topic is normally such big markets are showing OEMs, manufacturers that are leading the pace in terms of technology. It is certainly true for the German-based market, which is not only the OEMs like Volkswagen, Mercedes, Daimler, but also the key German suppliers like Bosch, Conti, and so on, ZF. What we now see alongside the electrification, alongside the way to autonomous driving, that now also China is becoming a leading nation with leading companies in those fields. On batteries, CATL is probably on a global scale even the leading battery cell supplier. We see also companies including Huawei, for instance, but also some, let's say, mid-size startup companies who are starting to play an important global role on autonomous driving. On connectivity-related features, also Chinese companies are really coming up. So I see also kind of a economic ecosystem on these new trends that are forming the automotive market of the upcoming decade, where China is taking with its companies a leading position. Probably not the dominant position only, because we still have strong forces in the West, including US, where you are currently based.
Sure.
But China is certainly leveling out, and the politically decoupling will certainly fuel this trend, as China is for geostrategical reasons also supporting this trend to be a bit more independent from, in particular, US-based technology. So this will also come into play for the automotive market, that we see very competent and kind of dominant players in this technology field as well. So with this, I would say when I was coming 2004, it was really, we were exporting technology and we were harvesting the big domestic market for the benefit of both sides. We were alongside also bringing production technology, quality technology all into China. We have grown the industry, but it was very much, let's say, in terms of technology transfer, a one-way street. Whereas nowadays, also alongside our strategy, it's a two-way one. We are also further building up on our R&D capabilities in China. We have our Carrier China, which is rapidly ramping up. We have Volkswagen Anhui, which serves also as an R&D hub for our NEV activities. And we will certainly develop here in China technologies that will find their way into the world. So we do what probably is happening in the industry anyway. This is probably the most remarkable development I've seen in the last 14 years, that China has really, you mentioned this, on the NEV market, but it's more or less China has reached and surpassed the tipping point, where from a, let's say, more import market in terms of technology, China is really going now into a very mature stage of also driving global trends.
Yeah, definitely. The way I would describe it is the world wakes up to China.
Yes.
Sort of, and now I see Volkswagen and Anhui is really now the true a kind of a Chinese Volkswagen entity.
Absolutely.
Where you're really built from the ground up rather than importing and doing things like before. So yeah, I guess with that, I think that's it. Very that's a great answer for the last question, because you've been in China and you've seen these changes. So that's it. That's it from me, my side.
Was a pleasure, my friend.
As you've heard from our conversation, Dr. Wöllenstein was pretty candid and addressed the elephants in the room, such as issues the ID series confronted, as well as the predicament of the Škoda brand, and how it is working with local Chinese players and stepping up its own R&D and sales and marketing game to meet the fast-changing needs of Chinese consumers. Know the enemy and know yourself. Then you will never lose a battle. This famous quote from Sun Tzu's Art of the War comes to mind after hearing Dr. Wöllenstein's comment that China has finally made it. Understanding where you are as well as where your competitors are is halfway to winning the battle. Volkswagen needs to tackle the Chinese market with an entirely new attitude and approach and mindset in the age of smart EVs. As long as it can balance its strength with speed, innovation, and execution, it will be fine.
Lei and I will be sharing more of our conversations with the men and women around the world, moving the EV, AV, and mobility sectors forward as part of this China EVs and More Max series. Some folks will be instantly recognizable, but some will just be people that are doing amazing things in the space that we think deserve to be highlighted. Don't worry though, Lei and I will continue to host our live weekly China EVs and More Twitter Spaces room that summarizes that week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility space. For those that can't catch the live show, you can find the China EVs and More pod on all major platforms or wherever you normally get your podcasts. As EV adoption reaches its global tipping point, it'll be even more important to stay updated on everything that's happening here. Lei and I are confident that China EVs and More is the best resource to do that. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening.